pulled the trigger that killed your son, masturbates to memory of you.
For taking our parents and our sins. I wish I could take it back, but reality is that we can't.
In a shocking twist of fate, a courtroom turned from a place of justice to a scene of horror as children, once viewed as innocent, became the perpetrators of an unimaginable crime. The chilling tale of how these young lives spiraled into violence reveals not only their tragic choices, but also the haunting question: what drives children to commit acts so heinous that they shatter the very foundations of our society? Join us as we look into the disturbing world where childhood innocence meets deadly consequences. Before looking into the chilling courtroom events, let's take a closer look at David Moses and the horrific crime he committed. On a quiet evening in Northeast Bakersfield, 81-year-old Dorothy Sessions was preparing dinner in her home, unaware of the imminent danger. David Moses, a troubled teenager with a history of crime, along with his accomplice, Cotillion Nash, broke into Dorothy's home intending to burglarize it. However, when she confronted him, their plan turned violent. In a brutal attack, David Moses and Cotillion Nash assaulted Dorothy so viciously that she became unrecognizable. The sheer cruelty of the acts shocked the entire community. As details of the crime came to light, the community was left questioning how someone so young could commit such an atrocity. During the trial, evidence revealed Moses' troubled past, marred by severe physical, verbal, and emotional abuse, which seemed to have fueled his violent tendencies. Prosecutor David Wilson exposed the depths of Moses' criminal history, which included not only the murder of Dorothy Sessions, but also horrific acts of sexual assault against family members and other children while in group care. As the trial unfolded, anticipation filled the courtroom. Would justice be served for Dorothy's brutal murder? During his sentencing, Moses shocked everyone with his behavior. Instead of showing remorse or fear, he chuckled, laughed, yawned, and even appeared to fall asleep, as if the entire process were a game. His lack of empathy or regret left the courtroom stunned. Faced with a disturbing crime and Moses' lack of remorse, the judge's decision weighed heavily. In the end, David Moses was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, a judgment that left the courtroom in shock. The community, still reeling from the tragedy, was left to grapple with the darker aspects of humanity and the devastating consequences of a life shaped by abuse and violence. While prosecutor David Wilson portrays Moses as a significant danger to society, highlighting his troubled history, the defense argued that his upbringing and potential for rehabilitation warranted hope for eventual parole. After careful consideration, the judge ultimately ruled that David Moses would spend the rest of his life in prison, a verdict that evoked mixed emotions: relief, anger, and disbelief. Following the horrific courtroom behavior of David Moses, we now turn to another unsettling case that left a community shattered. In the quiet town of Chardon, Ohio, an ordinary day turned to tragedy on February 27, 2012, at Chardon High School. Thomas T.J. Lane, a troubled teenager with a troubled past, carried out a plan that would forever scar the lives of many. Armed with a stolen .22 caliber handgun, Lane entered the school cafeteria and targeted a group of students, opening fire. Chaos erupted in seconds as the sounds of gunshots filled the school. 5 students were rushed to the hospital, clinging to life, while 3 others tragically succumbed to their injuries. The community was left reeling, struggling to understand how such violence could take place in their peaceful town. Parents anxiously awaited news of their children, and teachers Frank Hall and Joseph Ritchie were hailed as heroes for confronting the shooter and risking their own safety to protect students. As the dust settled, the full scale of the tragedy became clear. 3 young lives had been cut short, and the grief-stricken families and community sought answers and justice. Lane, it was revealed, harbored a personal grudge that fueled his actions. What led him down such a dark path? And could anything have prevented this tragedy? These questions lingered as Lane's trial approached. His behavior in the courtroom only added to the horror. Lane, a teenager with a history of violence, faced charges of aggravated murder and more. On the day of the shootings, he had worn a white t-shirt with the word "killer" scrawled on it. And, to the dismay of the families present, He arrived in court wearing the same shirt, smirking without a hint of remorse. He taunted the families by laughing, smiling, and even giving a middle finger during their statements. One family member tearfully expressed the loss of a future they would never experience with their loved one, watching them graduate, get married, and start a family.
Go to college, graduate college, get married, have children. I will never be an aunt, and my children will never know their uncle.
Yet, Lane's lack of empathy was chilling. His behavior left many wondering if he relished the pain of his victims' families. As the trial concluded, Lane stood expressionless as the judge sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms without parole. Despite the gravity of the sentence, Lane remained detached, showing no remorse or regret. His cold reaction left the courtroom horrified and the community grappling with the aftermath of his horrific actions. In the wake of this tragedy, the families of the victims sought accountability beyond the criminal justice system, filing wrongful death suits against Lane's family and the school district. For many, the scars of this senseless act of violence would last a lifetime. The haunting question remained: how could a young individual become so detached from humanity? Next is a chilling story involving a young life turned dark. This time, it's the case of Joshua Earl Patrick Phillips, a 14-year-old whose life took a horrifying turn with the murder of his 8-year-old neighbor, Maddie Clifton. In November 1998, Joshua, who seemed like any other quiet, friendly teenager, was hiding a reality steeped in fear and strict discipline at home. His father, a man with a history of violence and substance abuse, had a fierce temper and imposed rigid rules. This tense home environment became even more intense after the family moved to Jacksonville, Florida, where Joshua would soon become involved in an unimaginable crime. One day, Maddie came over, asking Joshua to join her for a game of baseball. In the course of their play, an accidental hit left Maddie injured and crying. Overcome with fear of his father's reaction, Joshua tried to silence Maddie's cries, making a series of terrible decisions that ended in hiding her beneath his bed. Despite his efforts to carry on as if nothing happened, Joshua was haunted by his actions and living in constant fear. A week later, the horrifying truth emerged when Joshua's mother, Melissa, discovered Maddie's lifeless body hidden in his room. The police were called immediately, leading to Joshua's arrest and a trial that would raise questions about his motives. Although some speculated on a darker intent, the autopsy found no signs of sexual assault, leaving many details shrouded in mystery. Joshua was tried as an adult, with his defense focusing on panic rather than intent. Despite his young age, the jury found him guilty of first-degree murder, resulting in a life sentence without parole. His case ignited debate over appropriate sentencing for young offenders, while the unanswered questions left a permanent mark on the community as Joshua began a life of reflection and personal reckoning within prison walls. From the tragic tale of Joshua Phillips, we encounter another case that reflects the troubling intersection of youth, crime, and the harsh realities of punishment. This time, it's the story of Nehemiah Griego, a 15-year-old from Albuquerque, New Mexico, whose actions stunned a community and added another chapter to the narrative of young lives marked by violence and trauma. In January 2013, Nehemiah committed an unthinkable act. He took the lives of his parents and 3 younger siblings. To the outside world, Nehemiah seemed like an ordinary teenager, but beneath the surface, he was struggling with an unstable and difficult family life. Reports would later reveal that Nehemiah felt isolated, misunderstood, and resentful towards his family, a situation that culminated in a devastating choice. Nehemiah's behavior in court painted a chilling picture for those present. Unlike some defendants who show remorse or appear broken by their actions, Nehemiah's demeanor was notably calm and unflinching. Observers described him as almost detached, showing little reaction or visible emotion as the judge and lawyers recounted the horrific details of his actions. His demeanor raised questions about whether he truly grasped the gravity of his crimes, or if he was emotionally numb due to the trauma he had endured. Prosecutors used this stoicism to argue that he posed a continued threat to society, portraying him as a young man who had not only committed these acts, but also seemed alarmingly indifferent to the consequences. However, the defense argued that Nehemiah's cold demeanor was not a sign of lack of remorse, but rather a symptom of a deeply troubled upbringing and mental health issues. Experts suggested that his emotional state might be the result of trauma and emotional suppression learned in an environment where he often felt unseen and neglected. The defense team portrayed him as a young man whose emotional detachment was a coping mechanism for years of isolation. loneliness, and unexpressed anger. As the trial continued, debates raged about Nehemiah's mental state and the extent to which he should be held responsible. Psychologists brought in by the defense testified that he showed signs of emotional distress that could have impacted his decision-making, showing the complexity of trying a teenager as an adult. These chilling cases force us to confront a harsh reality. The innocence we often associate with childhood can be shattered by unthinkable acts of violence. From David Moses to Nehemiah Griego, these stories reveal how complex and fragile the line between youthful inexperience and calculated brutality can be. While the reasons behind their actions vary, panic, manipulation, or trauma, one thing is clear. These events challenge our understanding of crime, punishment, and the potential for redemption in even the youngest offenders. As we reflect on these tragedies, we're left with unsettling questions about human nature, society, and how we protect both our children and ourselves from the darkest corners of the human mind. What do you think drives young people to commit such horrific acts? Is it nature, nurture, or a deadly mix of both? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into true crime stories that reveal the darkest sides of humanity. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Stay informed, stay curious, and keep questioning the world around you.